a man who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I'm in a very good place right now. My shoulder does hurt, and my truck is still in need of some more fixing. It's what you call a work vehicle, even though I don't have a job. I work on it a lot. Well, I also pay other people to work on it from time to time, but it's paid for. I'm having issues with the cats. They absolutely refuse to do any work around the house. I've tried and I've tried, and they just look at me like I'm crazy or something. They refuse to clean their own boxes, and it's like they're completely handicapped when it comes time for food. You'd think they could figure out a simple thing like that, wouldn't you? But I have coffee, and therefore I'm in a good place. If you'd like to join me in a good place, swing by 4501 McPherson and pick up the best coffee in the universe. If it's too far to drive, you can go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop and order a ton of coffee if you so choose. I wonder what that would look like being delivered to the front yard. I have a rant. I may have already ranted about this one time in the past, but I'm going to rant about it some more because it's annoying. I listen to a bunch of podcasts each week while working around the house. The more gooder the podcast, the more work I can get done. All that baking last week and making cookies and packaging them up, and well, I kind of ran through all of the podcasts that I had stored away on my player to a point where I was searching for new folks to listen to. I used to listen to John and Stacey Edwards at the Paranormal Sideshow. Well, they did 2 shows in July and 1 in October. You'd think, being into ghosts and things, they would have done a few more than 1 in October. I know it's a lot of work. Trust me. I've only been doing this for a couple of weeks. It's a lot of work. But if you're going to call yourself a podcaster, that means that you should be doing podcasts as well as things that put food on the table. Vic, do I really have to say anything? Christopher Garetano is working on his next documentary, so he doesn't have time to do the show. He works on his documentaries like most people work at living. That guy is intense, but his shows are always very much worth watching or listening to. I searched and I searched trying to find some new people to listen to. And like I said, I just can't track any down. I selected maybe a dozen and I just listened to them and I did my best to like them. And then I wound up canceling them because I couldn't fathom what they're talking about. It just didn't appeal to me. They were not Cam and Kyle. They were not John and Stacy. They were not Vic Hermanson with Annabelle Lee and the rest of the cast. They didn't appeal to me. I have very eclectic taste. Well, if you happen to know any of these people, maybe get a sharp, pointy stick and tell them, hey, isn't it about time you earn that title of podcaster? Hmm. If you happen to know of a show that you think I might be interested in, send me the name and I'll check it out. Don't be offended if I don't listen to more than one episode. I have extremely bizarre taste when it comes to just about everything. I like Hawaiian pizza. Here is a question for the music folks out there. Mert Bell used to play bumper music before and after commercials. If you listen to him on the computer after he'd already done the show, you'd notice the music had all been taken out and they would just play some generic public domain stuff. But he played some really cool music when he was live on the air. His taste in music was a lot like mine. We listened to a lot of the same songs. If you get a chance to ride in my truck and listen to the music I listen to, you'll probably hear a lot of songs that he played. One song that he kept playing on a regular basis, but he never quite seemed to know the name of the group. He would play it and he would call them by one name, and then later he'd play the same song and call them by another name. The group was called the Ketchups, and the song was the Ketchup Song. I like it, and it's on my playlist. Now for the biggie. Who out there can tell us, and I already know the answer, who can tell us why was the song called the Ketchup Song? Why was the group called the Ketchups? Put your answers in the comments and let's see who really knows their obscure things about music. What is a pet? What turns an animal into a member of the family? Why do some folks think having beasts inside is wrong, while others of us can't live without them? I've had some kind of fur-covered being living in my house for as far back as I can remember. We had this one weird Siamese cat way back that was more of an overlord than a pet. You could pet him once in a while, but only on his terms. He went on trips with us. He rode in the camper, and he had his own personal bathroom, which the rest of us, we had to wait till we stopped somewhere if we needed to go. He was better taken care of than we were. We never had dogs when I was growing up. My dad didn't like dogs. He said all they did was bark and poop. My entire life we had cats, a few fish, but fish make horrible pets. You can't really play with them, and if you take them out of the tank for too long, they stop doing everything. We had something other than a person in our home forever. Something weird happened when the old man got a little older. One day, long after he should have been retired, but he was still working, he found a dog. Some stray showed up at his place and he began feeding it. Next thing you know, the dog is living inside, has its own bed right next to his. Why stop with just one? Next thing you know, he's taking in strays right and left. During one of the many hurricanes that blew into the Houston area, my dad called and he asked if he could come down for a visit. I told him he was always welcome at our home. He showed up in his van with about 12 to 14 dogs. A few were his, but most of them were just strays that he'd picked up on the on the way out of town. He would drive up and down every street in Bay Cliff, and if he saw a dog walking down the street or curled up on the side of the road, he'd open the back door and call, and the dog would run over and jump in. Now, these are not pets. These were strays, wild animals that had pretty much given up on society. And yet here they were coming to the old man and going for a ride with him, like a bunch of little kids with a van that says free candy on it. Well, all these dogs wound up in my backyard, which was interesting because our dog suddenly discovered he couldn't go outside when he needed to. Had to go to the front yard on a leash. I spent an entire week contacting everybody I knew, trying to find homes for all these animals. I managed to give about half of them away. A lot of the people that took the dogs, they said they were okay. They needed a bath or two, but other than that, they weren't bad dogs, just unexpected dogs. My dad took the remainders and put them back in the van and headed back to Bay Cliff. He'd also had 10 cats at the time, but the cats absolutely refused to get in the van with the dogs, so he just left a 30-pound bag of cat food in the kitchen and left the cats in the house. Fortunately, the house was still there when he got home. Bay Cliff is kind of high out of the water, and so the place didn't flood. What magical power did my dad suddenly possess that made what would normally be a bunch of wild dogs decide to go for a ride with him? Dogs don't necessarily get along with other dogs just because they have four legs, and yet here were total strangers piling up into a small van with a bunch of other dogs. None of them had collars, and none of them had families that were looking for them as far as we knew. The ones I was able to give away, they stayed with their families, and the families took good care of them. I was selective who I contacted. As my class was about to escape from Fort McClellan and attempt to keep our jobs all along the southern border, we were handed lists of apartments in Laredo that we were to contact and hopefully be able to get someplace to call home. I put a circle around a couple of places and I jumped on a payphone. This was long before cell phones. Once arrangements were made, we had to mail a check to the apartment office. They had to wait for the check to clear and then mail us back an agreement saying that we now had an apartment, which we had to sign and then mail back to them. And then they mailed us a letter saying we now had a home. It's so much easier today just doing it all on a computer. It turned out that dozens of us all managed to get apartments in the same complex. In fact, it was the same building. Over the phone, the place sounded pretty good. New construction. There was a parking lot that was paved. It was too small for the size of the apartment, but it was paved. They were all one-bedroom apartments. Absolutely no pets allowed. Danny was kind of an odd character. He kept telling everybody he was originally from Del Rio. His dad had been a pilot, and Danny moved around a lot. Laredo was considered a punishment station back then. Any agent that screwed up was reassigned to Laredo, and they were stuck there from then on. Once you were assigned to Laredo, it was nearly impossible to get reassigned elsewhere. Most of the journeymen were either guys that had screwed up somewhere, or they were locals that discovered they just had to be home. When our class arrived, we were assigned stations at random. Nobody said, oh, these people screwed up, send them to Laredo. No, they just plastered the southern border with bodies. We hadn't been around long enough to screw up at the time that we were assigned, and that Thanksgiving massacre hadn't happened yet. There were second and third generation agents being sent to what their parents and grandparents considered the ends of their careers. Getting back to Danny. One day, he let slip the fact that his dad had been a pilot here in Laredo back in 1963. Wait a minute. You were born in 1963. The cat was out of the bag. Danny had actually been born here in Laredo at Old Mercy Hospital. Where am I going with this? Oh, yes. Danny had some pets that he snuck into the apartment when the management wasn't looking. The reason I know this is I helped him sneak. These were not pets in my book. These were creatures that needed to be unalived, as Josh would say. In the corner of the apartment, Danny put a huge pen with two rattlesnakes. I knew this because, well, like I said, I helped him put the thing there. Real, live, rabid, poisonous zombie rattlesnakes. I asked him if he was actually able to pet these things, and he said no. They would kill him. Danny wasn't done just having the two snakes. They gave birth to a bunch of tiny little poisonous danger noodles. It was not a very big pen anymore. Danny was having to keep dozens of critters to feed his pets. There were little pens filled with soon-to-be snacks. These critters all needed to be fed and have some place to get rid of yesterday's dinner. His apartment had a distinct stink to it. Rodent pee was the flavor of the week and month. Uh, you knew there was something in that apartment other than a human. At least you prayed. No human should smell like that. Well, it was intense. Not even a year after I had moved into the apartment complex, I managed to find a house to move into. I wanted to get out of the apartments because there was no parking. Now, there was something like, I believe there were 14 units in that building, and of the 14 units, there were only 12 parking spots. You come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, you had to park elsewhere. Not at a different building, but sometimes completely out of the complex. Now, some people had more than one car. Imagine that. Well, Danny decided that having a huge pen, a small pen full of a huge pile of creatures that all needed to be fed every day, and all they did was they laid there waiting for food to fall in front of their noses. Well, that and the smell of all that rodent pee, I guess he decided it was just too much. One day he somehow managed to get that pen into the back of his pickup. He drove out into the country and he turned his babies loose in the wild. Some unlucky rancher wound up with about a half dozen or so new snakes to worry about. Just to prove that he wasn't done being odd, he found a domesticated bobcat kitten, which he named Chauncey. The previous owner had had the cat declawed, which I know today's standards that's considered inhumane, but back then it was the thing to do. None of my cats have ever been declawed. Chauncey was just a cute little kitten until he grew up and grew up and grew up. He got to being about 40 pounds. It didn't take long for him to realize that just 'cause he didn't have claws didn't mean he couldn't put a hurt on you. He still had teeth. What he loved to do is he would hide in the corner of the living room and wait till you're not paying attention to him. He would come flying out from behind whatever he was hiding behind, land on your shoulder, and grab an ear. It's a good thing I was quick, or I'd have had both ears pierced several times. Some odd reason Chance wants to sit between me and what I'm doing again. Well, his little fur ball became a giant pain in the ear. Cats secrete a substance from their cheeks. There is one of those words that you should strive to get correct. Secrete as opposed to secret. At the academy, I heard a few instructors tell us about folks trying to secrete illegal substances on their bodies. That actually sounds quite painful. Scent glands are specialized glands that produce a semi-viscous secretion, which certain odor messengers known as pheromones that impact the behavior of cats around them. Most cat lovers have observed their cats rubbing against objects in the home and even against people's legs. Bobcats do this as well. Chauncey would move around the apartment, always with one cheek right up against the wall. The white wall. The formerly white wall that was beginning to take on a brownish color about 12 inches up off the floor. After several months, it looked as if Danny's apartment had been flooded with a bunch of water that had oil floating on the surface. Every wall throughout the entire apartment. Having more apartments than parking space, well, like I said, I moved out, and first thing I did when I was away from the apartments was I got me a cat named Gladys. Gladys, well, she became the overlord as well. Speaking of big, dangerous pets, at one time, folks living in England could own just about anything they wanted. So they did. Up until the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976, folks with way too much money and not enough gray matter would import anything on four legs. There are videos of women, usually tall, skinny women, walking every big cat known to man, and a few unknown. Why, you may ask? Why not, they would say. I have all the gold and the silver, so now I want a leopard. If it can kill you, it's not a pet. Walking an animal who considers most of us to be on the menu can lead to at least some of us being on the menu. Add to this, most cats are naturally born escape artists, and you're just minutes away from somebody losing something important, like an arm or a leg or their life. When the government finally got the message about wild animals not making good pets, they passed the law saying, no more. Most people don't like folks telling them what to do, especially people with lots of money. What do we do with Fluffy? I couldn't find much about what happened to a lot of these cats that were turned over to the government. Either they went to zoos or something less happy happened to them. These cat people were like cat people all over the world. We love our cats. Even when they tear the couch to pieces, they break valuable things, or they kill the maid. What's a dead peasant or two? Let's face it, some folks are dense when it comes to things like nature and wildlife and the environment. Take Fluffy for a drive to the country and turn him loose. It's the natural thing to do. After keeping Fluffy in your mansion for the last 10 years, now he gets to fend for himself. The number of big cats imported into the UK does not match up with the number turned in 1976. People have been report seeing what they has become known as ABCs or alien big cats ever since people have been able to report things. The authorities will send in some investigators who will have a look around, and then they'll show a photo of a rather large but obviously not a monster cat, and they'll say that the witnesses were mistaken. They thought this 10-pound tabby was a 50-pound lion. Obviously, most people living in England must have eye trouble, according to their government. Why would they be so willing to ignore sightings and make fun of people that report them? It's a lot easier to say that some guy is crazy and seeing things than to admit that, hey, there's some dangerous animal out there in the wild, in the countryside, and being your government, it's our duty to go find this thing and get rid of it. Nah, just making fun of people is so much easier. If you admit there's a problem, now you're duty bound to fix the problem. Pablo Escobar was one of those guys who had just way too much money and not enough good causes to support. I think that was his falling down part right there. He needed some really big charitable foundation to be in charge of, like, some really rich folks we have here in the US. Now, come to think of it, that was a bad idea too. Anyway, Pablo Escobar had all the money in the world. He could have anything he wanted, just about. Being an international drug kingpin, he decided he wanted to have his own private zoo. But he was going to have a very private zoo because you can't let just anybody come roaming about your property when you've upset folks by killing their relatives. So, Pablo had his own private zoo, which he filled with all kinds of exotic animals. One day, one day, and it was around Christmas time, I'm sure, Pablo came down the stairs from his bedroom singing, "I want a hippopotamus for Christmas." I'm sorry. Okay, he probably didn't do that. I don't know if Pablo Escobar could sing. I've never heard him sing, but I do know that song. So he told his henchmen, "I want a hippopotamus. In fact, not just a hippopotamus, I want 4 hippopotami." His lackeys, being lackeys, they knew better than to tell him no. When you've got all the money in the world, nobody tells you no. So they went and they got him 4 hippos, which they proceeded to put in his private zoo. When you buy large animals to populate a zoo, you have to take into consideration how much it's going to cost to feed them. Unless you have all the money in the world, an average hippopotamus eats about 150 pounds of food a day. That's per day, per mouth, every day, 24/7. The adults have no predators here in the United States, in the Americas. The teenagers, well, they don't have any predators either. A teenage hippopotamus weighs about 100 pounds. There's nothing in the wild that looks at a hippopotamus and says, tasty. They look at hippopotamus and go, what the heck is that thing? And they run and hide. Nothing kills hippos in this side of the world. So here comes the government. They decide that Pablo Escobar he's made too many government officials unhappy by killing their relatives and things. Well, got to do something about him because now he's a problem that's out in the public view. Oh, yes, something else to know about hippos. They can run at 20 miles an hour. They kill more people than all the crocodiles in Africa. And Pablo got four of them, two of each, two men, two women, so they could make baby hippos. Some people are attracted to the drug world because you can make a lot of money in a very short period of time. The major drawback is their retirement policies are horrible. You usually wind up dead, unless you work for one of the big drug companies, the ones that pay a lot of money to our governments to stay in business. But most drug kingpins don't last very long. Well, Pablo wound up dead in 1993. The authorities kind of objected to his competing with them. They also objected to him killing people. Once the shooting had stopped, the authorities got busy divvying up, well, processing, what valuables there were for the taking. The animals in the private zoos were shipped out to other zoos where the public would get to see them. But what do you do with a bunch of 3,000-pound eating machines? The decision was made to just leave them. Let them roam about the banks of the Rio Magdalena and let nature take care of them. Nature will kill these hippos so the government doesn't have to. What could possibly go wrong? I guess these folks didn't watch Jurassic Park. You know, when Dr. Ian Malcolm said, life finds a way. Two hippos plus two hippos equals lots of hippos. The two pairs soon turned into a herd or a coven or whatever you call a stampeding bunch of creatures. There are no predators in South America willing to take on a 3,000-pound thing. So even the babies were pretty much immune to everything except disease. A baby hippo weighs about 50 pounds. There is a simple, quick solution, which is just too complex for most political minds to grasp. Bert Gummer. Okay, maybe not him in particular, but somebody like him. You know, somebody with lots of firepower and the ability to use it. It will take something a lot bigger than the standard issue round that they have in the military. The government could hold a lottery. You know, they could say, okay, you pay us $100 or $200 or $1,000, and we'll put your name in this big box full of names, and then we'll draw somebody's name out, and whoever that person is wins a self-paid trip to South America where they get to hunt a hippo. They would have so much money by the end of that lottery, they would be doing crazy things like starting their own private zoos. The authorities say nobody gets to kill Pablo's hippos. Of course they say that. They're the ones who turned them loose. Some journalists say as many as 500 people may have been removed from this world by these creatures. There may be as many as 1,000 hippopotami living along the banks of the Rio Magdalena today. That's 1,000 potential accidents, 1,000 potential killings running loose that nobody wants to do anything about. The folks all worried about saving the environment are ignoring the impact these beasts are having on that same environment. Just think, hippo burgers. Stop listening to the voices of the people running around yelling and screaming about the environment while sitting at home in their air conditioned apartments and watching everything go by on TV. And maybe it's time to listen to the folks that are out there trying to live and wind up dying because of these hippo. Snakes are not pets. They have no fur and they move funny. How can anything with no feet be able to move around so much? I hear about people that simply have to have a gigundous, extraordinary, huge snake because it's big. I don't think your pet should look at my pet as its next meal. Keeping huge snakes in your home is just too risky. To begin with, you can't train them to do anything. I knew a guy who taught his cat to ring a bell when it needed the great outdoors. Snakes won't do that. Snakes do two things: they eat and they make baby snakes. July 2011, a Florida couple discovered just how dangerous keeping a giant snake can be. Their pet snake escaped from his pen and tried to eat their 2-year-old daughter. This was not the first, nor was it the second, not even the third time that the snake had escaped and gone looking for food. Each time they had caught it, put it back in its pen, and each time they thought, that'll never happen again. They found it trying to swallow their daughter after it had killed her. The pair were found guilty of third-degree murder, and each received a 12-year sentence to sit there and think about that giant snake that they just had to have. They should have put a 10 by 12 color photograph of their daughter just to poke them in the mind anytime they forget why they're there. November 2016, an African rock python escaped from its enclosure in a pet store and snuck upstairs for a bite. It wound up killing two young boys, ages 5 and 7. The owner of the store discovered his snake was missing and he went looking for it. And then he found it. Oops. I have no problem with snakes. I never mess with them when I encounter them out in the wild, being snakes. It's what they do. I do have a problem with folks deciding to heck with everybody else's safety. They just have to have a giant snake. It would be the same as if I owned a giant bomb and I just had it sitting on the kitchen counter. Just sitting there waiting to accidentally fall over. It's just not a good idea. Florida says that they're doing something about the invasive snakes taking over the Everglades. Right. They have so many rules and regulations on how you have to catch a giant snake before you can off it. If they were actually taking the situation seriously, the only rule would be don't shoot anything that belongs here. We're talking land sharks here. We're talking dangerous creatures that you don't know they're there until it's too late. Here in Texas, we have a hog problem. Uh, Domesticated hogs, well, they do what hogs do. They escape and they have little hogs. It does not take long for a domesticated hog to go wild. And once they go wild, they go real wild. They will eat anything and anyone that they can. In Texas, you must have a hunting license to go after wild hogs. The reason being is we don't want some guy like Mr. Bean running around with a semi-automatic rifle shooting at anything. That would that would be just bad. You do have to have a hunting license, which means you've been trained on how to do it safely. Other than that, there is no limit. You can hunt them at night using night vision goggles. You can hunt them with a machine gun if you've got a machine gun. You can hunt them in the daytime. You can hunt them at night. We're taking care of the hogs. I wish Florida would do something about their snakes. The only real thing you have to consider when hunting a hog, day or night, make it a good clean shot. When Florida says, take them all out, as in unalive any giant invasive snake that you can, then we'll know they're taking the problem seriously. Just imagine Mickey Mouse with a giant anaconda wrapped around him. When me and my sorry about that. When me and my wife were first married, I found a small, brightly colored snake in our kitchen. No, it was not a coral snake. I know what they look like. I have no idea how it got there. All the doors and windows were closed. I don't know of any access points, and yet here was a snake in the kitchen. I scooped him up and deposited him in an empty lot. No idea how he got in or where he went from there. About 7 years later, we moved to the house that we're living in today. Around a week into our new home, I found a brightly colored snake in the kitchen once more. I put him in the backyard, and I haven't seen him since. Finding a snake in your home is considered by some cultures to be a good thing. One being rebirth and transformation. Snakes shed their skin through a process known as ecdysis, symbolizing renewal and the ability to transform. It could mean healing due to regenerative qualities. Snakes can signify healing and vitality. Mercury had a staff with two snakes wrapped around it. Snakes mean wisdom because of their perceivedness and their close association with the earth. Well, yeah, they're as close to the earth as you can get since they don't have any legs. Certain cultures revere snakes as guardians and protectors. The snake's life cycle and behavior have led to associations with fertility and life force. I have not found any wisdom in my time on Earth. I do have an uncanny ability to know when I screwed up, usually a couple minutes after I did so. As far as healing, well, I always seem to be healing some part of my body that I screwed up somehow or other. Usually I screw something up due to my lack of wisdom. What can I say about alligators? They bite. What's the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Not much. They both bite. Neither makes a good pet. They all make bad pets. I remember back in the day, and I really hate that saying, folks would visit Florida where some lowlife would be selling baby alligators. What's that, little Timmy? You want a baby dinosaur to go with your hamsters? Why not? Later that same week, what's that, little Timmy? You can't find your hamsters? My, but your baby dinosaur sure looks well fed. If you have to keep something alive in order to keep your pet alive, then something ain't right. One day you're teaching your son how to feed an alligator. The next thing you know, you've got a serial killer on your hands. It is actually legal to own a pet alligator in many states. You do need a permit and probably a mental exam. An alligator will eat anything it can catch. They're masters of stealth, and you never expect the Spanish. Oh, no, sorry about that. You never expect an alligator attack until it's already too late. They don't chase people. That running in a zigzag, well, you're just wasting your time. Yes, an alligator can outrun anyone. They don't chase people. It's not their thing. An alligator is going to hide somewhere and wait for you to not being on your toes, not paying attention. Then he's going to grab you. And once he's got you in those jaws, well, suddenly the world has a very depressing look to it. And an alligator will eat anything it can catch. They don't chase people, so get over that one. We used to have a giant alligator, well, a huge alligator, at the fire station where I worked. Well, it wasn't at the station, it was out the back door in a place called Armand Bayou. This thing was 19 or 20 feet long. Nobody knows exactly because nobody ever wanted to get close enough to measure it. We didn't have Steve Irwin hanging around in the area. Nobody ever measured him, but we did see him laying across the street with his nose up against one curb and his tail up against the other. Many a motorist and quite a few sheriff's deputies had their trips interrupted when they came around the corner and discovered old Granddad was laying in the street again. Armand Bayou being right next door, well, alligators can't read. So they didn't realize they were supposed to stay inside the game preserve and not wander out onto the roads at night. A lot of folks didn't know, but alligators can climb. I've seen alligators in folks' backyards where there's a 4-foot fence completely enclosing the thing with a gate. And it's always a question, how did that sucker get in there? And later, how did that sucker get out of there? Oh, they just love people's swimming pools. An alligator call at the fire station was sometimes a weekly occurrence. There's an alligator in my backyard. We did not respond to alligator calls unless he was on fire. We were not about to risk life or limb to chase some baby dinosaur back into the swamp. If you build fancy homes on the edge of a swamp, you are going to have alligators in your backyard. There are enough dangers out there as it is without inviting them into your home. We have or had some alligators here at the college in Laredo. They were being studied by youngins that were trying to earn their white lab coats. One night, we received a call saying that one of the gators was missing. Could we drive around and have a look? Yeah, I drove over near their facility and I looked around, but I never got out of my vehicle. I spotted a couple of young agents. They were down near a ditch, poking around in the weeds. And I drove over to where these two guys were, and I asked them very politely, "What do you two idiots think you're doing?" Okay, I wasn't that polite, was I? Oh, we're looking for the alligator. Apparently, these guys didn't know what an alligator was or what it was capable of doing. I told them that they should get back in their vehicles and look for the alligator from the safety of the units. They were just, they had the clue. They did listen to what I had to say. I don't think I called them any more names. Yes, I had a reputation. We later discovered that the alligator was still in his enclosure. He was just hiding because that's what alligators do. There are enough dangers out there without inviting them into your life. Does anybody out there remember Lancelot Link? It was a kids' show where chimpanzees were used as the actors. It was a thing back then. Long before anybody figured out how to make a computer program that was far better to watch, they used live animals. They filmed them over and over and over and over until there was enough raw video that they could splice it together and make it look as if these animals were acting. Kind of like stop action figures, but where the figures don't stop. In the early 70s, kids were glued to their TV sets, watching as Lancelot and Matahari tried to defeat their arch enemies at Chump, the criminal headquarters for Underworld Master Plan. Hollywood, having zero imagination, immediately began dumping out TV shows involving somebody with an ape. BJ and the Bear was about a truck driver whose co driver was a chimpanzee. Over the few years that this show was being produced, this creature managed to do several $100,000 worth of damage to the interior of the truck. It would get mad and begin tearing the cab apart, and nobody could stop him. Depending on who you listen to, an ape can be as much as 5 times stronger than us. If you can lift a 100-pound weight with one hand, an ape can lift 500 pounds with one hand. Think of that during your next arm wrestling. Apes are cute when they're little. They look like teeny tiny little hairy ugly babies. You can train them to wear a diaper. You can get them to wear clothes and do things for you right up to the moment they get mad. We have things in common with these beings some people don't like to talk about. Things like war. One troop of apes has been known to move in and slaughter another ape troop so they can take over their territory and use the resources. A 14-year-old, 200-pound chimpanzee in Stamford, Connecticut, named Travis, left a woman in critical condition after attacking her, mutilating her face and hands. The owner, Sandra Harold, tried to stop the attack. She was also injured briefly, but she didn't spend the weeks in the hospital recovering. How would you like to have been Travis's owner, watching as a hairy beast turned your friend into a Picasso painting? The rest of your life, you would get to remember that little experience. I'll bet it comes up at every neighborhood party. Hey, remember that time that ape attacked that woman and nearly killed her? That was your ape, wasn't it? Researchers looking into ape violence have discovered it is a natural part of their lives. Professional race car driver St. James Davis and his wife LaDonna had a pet chimpanzee named Mo, whom they treated like a child. After Mo bit several people, the city of West Covina, California seized him and placed him in an animal sanctuary in Bakersfield, California. St. James and LaDonna waged long yet unsuccessful legal battle trying to get their ape back. March 3rd, 2005, while at the sanctuary during one of their many visits, St. James and LaDonna were attacked by two male chimpanzees named Buddy and Ollie. They had escaped their enclosure. In the ensuing attack, LaDonna lost her thumb. St. James, well, he lost a lot of parts. Permanent disfigurement, both extremities, and his testicles. It would appear as if these two apes didn't like the attention that the number 3 ape was getting. I came very close to going into the details of the damage done by these two apes, and then I thought maybe I shouldn't. I decided to save my less hardy listeners from some visions. If you want to read the gory details and, of course, see the photographs, simply search for St. James chimp attack. I can't imagine having parts of my sitter downer bit off. It'd make it extremely difficult to sit. Tamara Brogatti, 68, and her daughter April had been attacked by an ape, and they had to seek shelter in the basement of her home. Buck, who weighed 250 pounds, was rampaging about the property. April had received bites to her arms, legs, and body. Not nibbles, bites. Chunks are missing. Kind of like a very small shark is attacking you and removing hunks of meat. A buck had simply gone berserk, broke out of his enclosure before making the attack. Tamara called the sheriff's department and told them they needed to use deadly force. Don't hesitate. Bust a cap on this ape. Okay. That's not what she said, but she did tell the dispatcher to warn the deputies to use all possible caution, and they did. The folks at PETA had to weigh in on it. They blamed Tamara for causing the whole thing by not listening to them. When I was reading this article, the name kind of threw me there for a second. April had the same name as my nephew's mother-in-law. No, it was not April Bogatti. But when I first read the article, I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute." And then I realized, wrong state, different person. I have no interest in inviting anything that is 5 times stronger than me into my home. If it can kill me, it does not enter. Yet, you see it all the time. Somebody with more money than sense, or they watch too many episodes of Lancelot Link, and now their best buddy is a 200-pound ticking time bomb, followed by them wondering, oh, how can such a horrible thing possibly happen? I think it's your fault because you brought it into your home. Now, if you're visiting somebody and they have a pet ape, why are you visiting them? Birds are just weird. They have those huge heads compared to their bodies. They have wings, and then they have those creepy dinosaur feet. You can pet a bird even though they don't have any fur. What gets to me is birds that can talk. No, animals are not supposed to talk unless there's something really important that they're passing on, like, hey, the house is on fire, let's all escape, or hey, you forgot to take the trash out today. Other than that, Your pets shouldn't be talking to you. You can hear Second Chance in the background. She's talking to the outside people. So many times people have taught these winged creatures to speak. Some of them make more sense than a lot of the humans I've listened to. I would just love to see a TV news station that has a parrot doing the news. Hey, Holly, anybody out there listening to that one? Let's see a parrot talking on TV doing the news or the weather. There's a debate within the boys in the white lab coats whether some talking parrots have cognitive understanding of what they're saying. Birds have varying degrees of talking ability. Some can simply mimic a few words, while others have been known to have over a 2,000 word vocabulary. I know a lot of college kids that don't have that many words to use. Octopi are just weird. They're otherworldly. Their eyes are way too mobile. They have 9 brains. They sit there watching us, thinking, studying us, figuring out our weaknesses. Octopi can figure out how to escape, eat some other animal, and then sneak back into their own tank and close the lid. Octopi can move across land. You might wake up in the middle of the night with your pet octopi sitting on your face, looking like Kane from Alien. I worry about folks who decide to eat octopi. What if? What if they really are from outer space? Someday a flying saucer lands and out comes a bunch of beings with 8 arms and they ask, "Hey, where are our relatives that came to visit you?" And then they discover people have octopus on their breath. Things are going to get ugly. We have 2 dogs. I found both of them. In fact, I've had dozens of dogs over the years, and yet I've only ever bought one. All the others either showed up on their own or were they handed off to us by other people that found them. Found puppies. I worked with a guy. He weighed maybe 140 pounds. That was with his PBS on, pistol belt and things. He was just a small dude. Well, compared to me, 'cause I average 195 pounds. Steve loved his Rottweilers. He had 3 of them, I believe. They ranged from 100 to 130 pounds each. I would ask him who is actually taking who for a walk. Yeah, Steve didn't get it. His dogs were almost as big as him. Now I can pick up Emily with one hand. George, it takes 2 because he goes limp when you lift him. He's just like trying to pick up a bag of wet cement. It just droops. Pets should be small enough that if things get dicey, you're still in control without having to pull a gun on them. The neighbors and the police don't like it when a gun battle breaks out between humans and pets. We were discussing our neighborhood and we realized almost everybody on our block has at least one dog, and they like to communicate in the middle of the night with each other. Several folks do have a few cats. Everybody that we know has some kind of an animal living with them. In ancient Egypt, Anubis was the jackal-headed guardian of the underworld. He is typically portrayed as being half human, half dog, or half jackal. In ancient Greece, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, guarded the gates to the underworld. Once a soul had crossed the river Styx, it was up to Cerberus to be sure and keep him there. In mythology of the British Isles, there's a nocturnal creature known as the Grim. A black dog with glowing red eyes. He appears in the middle of the night to foretell death. Some Native American tribes believe that seeing a trio of white dogs means good fortune is on the way. I've heard people ask whether or not Jesus had a dog. The answer is complicated. 2,000 years ago, dogs were utilitarian. They worked by either guarding flocks, controlling other animals, protecting the home, or fighting. The Roman army had attack dogs that were something to see. Jews had dogs, but not as pets. Their beasts were working animals. They had jobs to do. They stayed outside, they guarded things, they took care of things, but they weren't pets. None of that fetch the stick or play dead, well, unless you got ran over by a chariot. So Jesus may have had several dogs, but he never had a dog. It's amazing what some folks can teach their dogs, while others of us can barely get our dogs to follow us around, which is what they usually do. Dogs can be trained to do some very bizarre things, like find drugs and people and bombs. They also have been known to discover diseases on people months before the best doctors have any idea there's anything wrong. A 2019 study found that dogs can correctly pick out blood samples from people who have had cancer with a 97% accuracy. The best cancer test you can buy is only 92% accurate. Doctors insist on using the man-made ones because you can't put a patent on a dog's nose. There's no money to be made by using a dog. The boys in the white lab coats are at this very moment trying to invent a robot nose. Robot Nose Corporation, which is near Chicago, Illinois, is trying to create a robo nose to sniff out things and make tons of money. I'm all for new inventions. It's not like you can walk down any street in town and not almost accidentally trip over a stray dog. Well, actually, come to think of it, you can't walk down any street in just about any town in the U.S. and not practically trip over a stray. They're everywhere. They're fairly cheap. All you got to do is feed them, and you got yourself a dog. Which would you rather work with? A piece of plastic with some company's name tattooed across its forehead that, well, is programmed to be friendly? Or would you rather have a real, living creature that is actually happy to see you there in the morning? And now, for the most dangerous pet of them all, the house cat. If you've seen 2 of my videos, you're going to know that I have cats. They walk back and forth between me and the camera while I'm trying to do the show. They grab the mic and they swing it back and forth. On occasion, you'll hear Second in the background screaming bloody murder because she's on the wrong side of a door. I've had people ask, what the heck is that noise? It's hard to believe such a small beast can make so much sound, and sometimes she'll do it for an hour. In ancient Egypt, cats were regarded as sacred because they were associated with the goddess Bast and Sekhmet. To kill a cat was grounds for extreme punishment. According to Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, whoever kills a cat in Egypt is condemned to death. Whether he committed this crime deliberately or not, the people would gather around and kill him. In many societies and cultures, it was believed that a surefire way to bring misfortune into your life was to harm a cat. In some mountain communities, it is believed that if a farmer accidentally kills a cat, his cattle, his livestock, everything is going to sicken and die. In other areas, there's a legend that cat killing will bring about all kinds of misfortune. Some cultures believe cats keep evil spirits away. The more cats you have, the better protected you will be. Maybe that's why I feel so safe. We have 5 cats inside, and I have no idea how many outside cats because they just run around the neighborhood. They keep us safe. Dogs protect you from things you can see. Cats protect you from the things you can't. Sometimes both of them have been known to hang around long after they are no longer eating food. Ghost dogs and cats have been reported on hundreds of occasions. It kind of makes you wonder just what is going on around us that we don't know anything about. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. I see I've run over quite a bit again, like I've done most shows. If you liked it, tell other people they should be listening. And if you don't like it, why are you still listening? Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.